Chapter 11 continued. Huey! Tar! Huey! Tar! Where are you? Fearful of getting pneumonia, Melody kept her body moving. It felt like she'd been out here for hours, but she knew that couldn't be true. Still, her petite frame and delicate constitution were all but exhausted. She could shout no longer. Rounding a lump of flailing bushes, a small clearing opened up before her. Not far away, a medium-sized standing stone rose out of the ground. A subtle mound of earth lay at the foot. Something about this looked sad to Mel. Her intuition cautioned her she might have found someone's private memorial. Crossing the ground strewn with nature's debris, she approached the rough-cut stone. Sure enough, it was indeed a grave. Standing before the large gravestone, she squinted to read the epitaph through the pouring rain. Between flashes of lightning, the haunting inscription jumped out at her. Here lies my beloved wife, Melody, whom I'll always adore. She gasped when she recognized her own name engraved in stone. In a sudden panic, she turned and fled, her mind uncertain of what it could mean. Unexpectedly frightened, she stumbled, running blindly through the bush, unable to see through stinging rain and flowing tears. Unknowingly, she had skirted the edge of the loch and was getting closer to the house. Then, without warning, the water appeared directly before her. A sharp cry of fear escaped her mouth as she accidentally tumbled in. Adrenaline fueled them on. Desperate to flee their oncoming doom, Hugo and Tar pelted for the closest border wall. Mr. Massacre Machine was calculatingly close behind them. Barely reaching it in time, they struggled over the barbed wire deterrent, snagging their ninja outfits. Tearing themselves free, their muddy onesie slippers slipped over wet, moss-covered slabs. As they fell over the top and down the other side, the thick wall shuddered as the unstoppable bulk rammed straight into it with a fury. Wham! God must be punishing us for being so bad, Hugo cried, rolling out of the way of falling flat stones. Thankfully, the barrier held. Tarzan hauled him to his feet, and together they fled towards a dirt farm track nearby. Not seeing any farmhouses, they paused to catch their breath. They had no idea where they were or which way to go. It was late. They were soaked through and through and were beyond cold and tired. They stood there in the hostile weather, arms hanging limply by their sides, unsure of what to do next. They were lost, and they were alone. Defeated, the two young boys started to cry. Shockingly cold water swallowed her whole as she went under. Rapidly she sank, water-soaked kimono pajamas weighing her down. Cheeks puffed to hold her breath, her eyes squeezed tight, Mel flailed about, frantic for which way was up. Her struggles came muffled to her ears, a momentary peace from the onslaught of the storm somewhere above the surface. And then her head popped above the moving waters, the force of the storm assaulting her ears once again. Then back under she went. Then up for air again. Up, down, loud, quiet. Audible splashing on the surface, then submerged flailing. An alternating ensemble of violent noise with eerie calm. Resounding ruckus, then deceptive peace. Howling fury, sinister stillness. Refusing to give up, she gasped for air. her long, patchy hair interfering dangerously with her ability to breathe. Letting out another desperate cry for help, she splashed to stay afloat. Her broken glasses in her pocket, she could just make out the shadowy shape of the mansion closer than she'd thought. Throwing her heavy arms over, she front-crawled/slapped her way through the water. Underwater weeds snatched at her kicking feet. The more she kicked, the more they tangled around her kimono legs. The more she fought, the more they pulled her under. Soon, poor Melody was completely submerged yet again, precious life-essential oxygen scant in her lungs. Then she made the mistake of planting her foot in the muddy bottom. Instantly and mercilessly, she got sucked in up to her calf. Her lungs began to burn as carbon dioxide began to build. Melody's mind was a turmoil of desperation and fear. Surely this couldn't be happening, but she knew that it was. And with horror, she realized she was now utterly helpless. In this most inhospitable and murky of wombs, she was going to drown. Melody's guileless thoughts turned to God. Concern and bewilderment ascended in prayer. Wasn't she too young to die? Would she not get to see her family again? She loved her brother, as disturbing as he can be sometimes. She was admittedly fond of young Tarzan, and of course she adored her dad. She didn't want to go so soon. It couldn't possibly be her time. She hadn't even seen a puffin in real life yet. Without being aware, Mel's movements had slowed. Her struggling ceased. Her hair floated eerily about her, as if suspended in a bleak vacuum. Young Melody was drowning, the dearest of souls departing. Suddenly, a strong hand from above grabbed for her, lifting her clear out of the swallowing muck and the numbing water. A limp little child she was, choking and spluttering while being picked up and held tightly in rescuing arms. "Daddy," Melody managed weakly. Dad was here, carrying her safely to solid ground. The magnitude of all she'd been through in the last couple of hours overwhelmed her. Following their mysterious host in the night, battling outside with a storm, the disturbing sight of the grave, the shock of almost drowning, and the relief of her narrow escape were all just too much for her. "I saw my name on a grave," she blubbered. She broke down and let it all out. This sweet little girl with the purest of hearts clung to her dear daddy, sobbing unrestrained into his big coat. The weather had calmed slightly while he rocked her back and forth, over and over again, whispering reassuring words in his daughter's ear. Dad looked sadly off into the distance. "It was never supposed to be this way," he spoke to no one in particular. "It was never supposed to be this way." Carrying his precious wee girl all the way into the house, he went to the front room where Kruger had lit a warm fire in the fireplace. The boys were there too, eyes red from tears, shivering in dry towels, edging as close as possible to the flames. "Melody," they cried, "where were you? We couldn't find you, but we looked and looked." The boys sniveled, snot running down their faces. "And we almost got eaten alive by a carnivore bull, but we escaped and didn't know what to do. But then Tony the pony came for us. He was our search and rescue party. We were so glad to get a ride on his back all the way home. He's not afraid of storms, but it was scary for us." It was Kruger who had fetched the pony and sent him off to go look for the children. Feeling subdued again, the poor boys returned to staring meekly into the fire. Wrapping his daughter snug in a blanket, Dad sat in his comfy armchair with Mel safe in his lap and close to his chest. He was just so glad Kruger had come in when he did and had asked about the kids. Realizing the children had been missing from the house, they'd quickly split up to search for them outside. Kruger went to the stable for Tony while Dad had gone downstairs and out to the lock. He was just in time to spot Mel struggling in the water. Turns out the two boys hadn't been that far from the house either. Kruger stood over by the window, looking devastated at what had happened to the kids. Melody gave a very limited account of what had happened to her, mainly mentioning following the light through the bushes, thinking it was Tarzan, and then happening upon the gravesite. But she was too tired to talk much, and was just relieved to be safe inside. "I am so sorry," Dad told her. "I never meant for it to happen this way." She lifted her damp head and looked up into her dad's saddened eyes. She was surprised by what she saw. A mixture of emotions she was unfamiliar with, having never witnessed them coming from him before. There was deep sorrow that only a grown-up can know, the irreversible pain of regret having hurt someone vulnerable they love. And there was something else she didn't recognize, a deep-seated grief over irretrievable loss. Melody closed her eyes and hid her head again, comforted by the gentle rhythm of her father's breathing. Cocooned in a dry blanket, held by paternal arms not yet ready to let go, she fell to sleep exhausted, waking up the next morning in her own bed.